Okay, welcome everybody. I am so thrilled to introduce our speaker today. Gonkar Gyatso was born in Lhasa, Tibet. He moved to London in the late 1990s on scholarship to the Chelsea School of Art and Design, where he attained his MA in Fine Art. Prior to this, Gonkar studied Chinese brush painting in Beijing, attending a BFA, and studied traditional Tibetan scroll painting in Dharamsala, India. He's been living and working in the West ever since, although now actually I think he's living in Chengdu, China, if that's correct, and is the founder of the Sweet Tea House, a contemporary art gallery dedicated to showing Tibetan work. Gonkar was the recipient of a Leverhelm Fellowship in 2003 and was an artist in residence at the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford. Gonkar's work has been exhibited in galleries and museums around the world, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, the Tel Aviv Museum of Art in Israel, the City Gallery of New Zealand, the Institute of Modern Art in Australia, the Rubin Museum of Art in New York, the Chinese National Art Gallery in Beijing, the Glasgow Gallery of Modern Art in Scotland, the Courtauld Institute of Art in London, the Berger Collection in Switzerland, I'm going to keep going, the Queensland Art Gallery and Gallery of Modern Art in Australia. Additionally, he has participated in the 53rd Venice Biennale in Italy, the 6th Asia Pacific Triennial in Brisbane, Australia, and the 17th Sydney Biennale in Australia. His work is held internationally in public and private collections. It's quite a resume, and we're so thrilled to welcome him to the Denver Art Museum. Our great thanks go to the University of Colorado and the Tibet Himalaya Initiative for bringing Gonkar to Colorado. Please help me welcome artist Gonkar Gyatso.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thanks for coming. I'm just going to go straight to the topic, and I have a plenty image to show. Normally, I'm not very good kind of talking about my work, so I would really try give some background of my practice. In 1980, that was the Beijing. I hope the photograph maybe it's in the 80s. I'm not quite sure. I just grabbed from the internet. I got the opportunity to go to Beijing to study, and then I have to say, it was probably almost my first time in Beijing, and also it's a very special time in Beijing, even in China, because late 70s and early 80s, Chinese government decided to open the door for the West, and so there's an amazing atmosphere in Beijing. And I remember during that 4 years in Beijing, I've seen, actually basically during that 4 years in Beijing, I learned much more about Western art through exhibitions and through books and through movies and the theaters. But in contrast, in the school, especially the art education was quite different, which is still not quite. I mean, I remember the school or even the teachers tried to break from the Cultural Revolution period. So there is a kind of time everybody's trying, but still there is a huge influence from that period. So, which means, for instance, I think the art school, I mean, not like nowadays in China. I mean, that time, I remember in Beijing, there is very few art school, and also the subject was very limited. I mean, especially the school I went, we only have two subjects, which is one is Chinese brush painting, One is we called Western oil painting. And somehow I was probably, I remember I consider myself good with line drawing. So when the school came to Lhasa to pick a student, actually we did take an exam. That's also kind of new because during the Cultural Revolution, actually, in China, I think the exam system be completely abolished. So young people go to school depending on their, I think, what do we call it? Kind of social class. So if you come from more Communist Party family background, you will go to school automatically. But if you have some relatives or your family used to be a landlord or somebody's the party not trusted, then even how good you are not allowed to go in. But by 80, it's all changed. So if you are good, you can take the exam, then you will get it. So that's was kind of the time I got into the school. So obviously I put myself into the Chinese brush painting class, and then the method of that teaching was in one way it's quite a tradition, I guess, because I mean for maybe first year and a half we've been doing lots of copies of masterpiece from the old classical paintings, and so basically they want you to have a good hand holding the brush, and also through using the ink to know more about the ink, because the Chinese ink is quite amazing material. You do need a lot of practice to know the capacity of that ink. And then of course there is a calligraphy to go with. And then I think after the other thing I mentioned, so then also the whole emphasis mainly on the technique, because I mean even the teacher was saying, you know, you I think in Chinese say 多动手 what's the basically say, you know, you have to move your keep your hand busy but don't think too much. So that means yes. So which is for someone as a new, which is fantastic. You learn really the hard way of the technique and the hand. But on the other hand, I think then there is what missing is the creative thinking and also critiques. Actually, there is no critiques, which is I mean, I was so surprised when I went to London study. Suddenly, I remember I was shocked by those students can really talk about their work for 20 or 30 minutes, and but somehow that's not being encouraged that time. You become, I mean, as a student, I remember we become a kind of the receiving end. Then the teacher will be just giving everything they have, and so that's really happened in the school. And then also one of the interesting, I should tell you, that time in China, I mean, for instance, Beijing is one of the most cultural city and the capital city. I mean, those days we don't even have that many museums or art galleries. There's only very few. Then there is no existing of a commercial art gallery or commercial art. For us to go to study art, we know when we finish, we know where we're going. I mean, basically, you become a government employee, and then you might become a teacher. You might work for the public relationship department, or you might work for. So then there is also Chinese, I think, art association, which is a government body. Then you might end up there. So there is no concept of selling art. I mean, that's something I learned probably how many years later? I think maybe until late 80s. So that was the kind of environment. But outside the school, as I mentioned before, it was quite fascinating and a lot of things happening. And so I mean, the first year and a half, I was a good student, staying in a class and learning those crafts. But after that, then with quite a few students, become a bad student, keep going out and missing the classes. And then that's sort of, unfortunately, I couldn't find any of my exercise from those days. I think because I'm moving too much, so I think I got lost. So I just got some example from the internet. So then as the Chinese brush painting part of the course, except practice in the classroom, then also the teacher will take you outside. For instance, during that 4 years, actually, we've been to quite a few provinces. Then normally, teacher will take us on the south, because that's more the landscape. It's more soft and more misty. It's kind of more good with the technique we learned. So we used to do that kind of landscape and even figures. And but at the same time, what we saw or what I learned from outside through reading, through go to those see those art show from West, or even some avant-garde artists, Chinese artists actually did show some of their work in the private, not private, I think they're more like a space which is not quite run by government. So through those things, then there is kind of also at the same time desire you want to do something. Then I think after 4 years, I went back to Lhasa, and then I still remember when I flew back from Lhasa, from the airplane through the window, when I saw this amazing blue sky, actually just like Colorado, and this dry mountain, suddenly I have this question in my head. I thought, gosh, the 4 years I spent in China learning those brush painting in the landscape, somehow it's not going to be able to use to deal with this kind of landscape and the climate. That was the kind of, then it was kind of scaring thinking, because suddenly you feel you need or you feel you didn't learn anything. Then this is the kind of the landscape when I came back to Lhasa. Then also one of the interesting thing is during the 4 years, I mean, except learning the technique, also I think myself has changed a lot. I mean, I'm kind of person not the one 4 years I left Lhasa. So when I came back to Lhasa, I think I noticed I'm looking things more different than 4 years ago, and so I see something which is I never kind of noticed before. So that's also one example of the Tibetan building in Lhasa. So it's kind of very, because the climate, so it's very kind of sharp and heavy, well kind of protected. Unlike during that 4 years in China, I see, especially in the south, very kind of elegant, nice, soft building. So this is kind of the challenge I had when I came back. And also, I think there is another thing happening in my head is one of the things I think also there is a kind of rebellion. Somehow, I want to kind of. Then one of the I mentioned I wanted to look. I feel I'm looking things differently. One of the things I think is it was a. I felt also I saw because before me there is also Tibetan artists and also Chinese artists living in Tibet in Lhasa. For instance, some of my early teachers. So when I look at their work, and then somehow I feel they didn't really grab the essence of Tibet or the surrounding, especially I think the landscape. Somehow when I came back, I immediately being drawn into this dry and blue sky, this landscape. So somehow I feel they didn't catch that, because for me I think it's a very harsh place. It's high altitude, it's cold, even though the air is clean. So I was kind of deliberately trying to capture that. And to able to do that, then I have to really leave my brush and the ink behind. Then I start using watercolor to explore the landscape. So that was quite a few sample I still have. Then also I have to mention that time I don't think I've seen the real work, but I saw a catalog and some printout of two of the American artists. One is Edward Hopper. Then the other one was Andrew. How do you spell? Andrew Wave. Andrew Wave. That's it. Especially Andrew Wave was really popular. I think I remember during mid '80s in China, and somehow I also really liked Hopper and Wave's work because I feel kind of it does relate to the surrounding in Lhasa, because if you leave Lhasa city, go out just a little bit further into the mountain, it will be deadly quiet, and then it's dry. So somehow, then it's very kind of also you feel kind of lonely, and then I think that's something I saw from especially Hopper's work and also Wave. So that's kind of the two artists I was looking up, and then dealing with the real mountain around Lhasa. Then I have to say, it was very tough for me to dealing with those mountains because my training was Chinese brush painting. Then we are not encouraged to do realistic drawings. It's more like how do you call it? Not abstract, but so I didn't really had that training. So when I saw those mountains, so I have to really learn how to draw the mountain just like what I saw. Then also later I was very interested in the Tibetan architect, and I like the kind of the shape and also the contrast of the color. Then of course I think there's one of the most kind of interesting things is I like this quietness, and also there is kind of lonely, and also one of the things I have to say, last couple of years, I've been many countries and I've seen lots of amazing landscapes. But I have to say, I never seen any landscape have a kind of spiritual feeling into it, except in Tibet, especially the mountain in Lhasa or some other part of the Tibet. I can really feel there is some kind of spirits in it, but maybe it's me, I guess. So it's same with some of the building. Then I think at that time also one of the things happening to me is except I was kind of critical to the artists, for instance my teacher, how they making their representation of Tibet, but at the same time then the challenge is then how I'm going to do it. So I remember that time myself and some of my fellow artists, we have that slogan say we're going to create a kind of very Tibetanist contemporary art. And so that was the aim, and then we started the Sweetie House. And then all those work is part of that process. And then gradually, then it was kind of an interesting journey for me, because 4 years before, when I go to Beijing, the monastery is not opened yet. Then for me, even though I grew up in Lhasa with my grandmother and with my parents, somehow I never exposed to the religion, the Tibetan Buddhism, because during that time all the monasteries being not open. So it was so refreshing and also kind of shocking for me to when I came back from Beijing. Suddenly, the first thing I remember, I saw my grandmother was holding the beads, the tenga, which I never seen before. Then I saw her in her house. Suddenly there is a shrine in the living room, which I never seen before. Then when you go out in town, suddenly you see there is lots of the monastery, especially the Chokhang in the middle of the Lhasa, because my grandmother's house just actually about maybe 10 minutes walk. It's opened, and so that's kind of really new for me. And so obviously then I kind of draw into it, and even though there is back of my head still, because I have to say when I was a teenage, before I go to Beijing, I almost become a Communist Party member. I nearly joined because I was ready, and also my boss think I was ready, because I really believed and also studied communist ideology. So there is also one of the things, when I saw all those monasteries and the Buddhas and the temples, and I saw my grandmother, then there is also a little voice on the back of my head say, is this right? So with all this kind of confused and excitement, then I started doing some working with the Buddha figure. Then that's probably the first time I started. And then you can still see there's somehow after those landscape period, now suddenly the Chinese brush influence is coming back. Even though I wasn't using the rice paper, we started using a kind of cotton fabric, then paint on the top. Because nice thing about the cotton is you can paint from the front, also you can paint from the background, so you can kind of create kind of different effect. So that was one of the very popular kind of art method at that time in Lhasa. And then I think then the interesting thing is that time when I'm dealing with those Buddha, I think it's kind of without any acknowledgement of Tibetan Buddhism and the religion and the history. So I was just doing because I like the form. Then also somehow, also there is it was kind of a very confusing time, and also a lot of energies, and also there is some how do you call it, the how do you say national 民族主义? That's it. It's also, thank you for that, happening in myself. So that's also part of the reasons that, okay, I had to go to the monastery and make something more Tibetan, because that was also part of the idea of that art movement. And so that period, I think I did some of those work, but these are little bit later. So today the talk, the image, I didn't put it as the timeline. I just put it as a kind of my practice with the subject. And then after spend some time in India, I went to London, and so that was one of those first pieces I did in London, still with the Buddha figure, but with some hesitation, because I remember I spent probably about 2-3 months looking around all the gallery in London and the museums. Then suddenly I feel I got lost, because before, I remember I go to London, I kind of have an idea what is art or what is not art. But after that few months spending looking different artwork, especially I remember there is one amazing show in the Royal Academy called The Sensation, which is part of the Saatchi collection, showing the young British artists like Damien Hirst and Tracy Amian. After seeing that show, it really kind of, I just kind of realized it looks like anything can be art. There is no definition say this is art, this is not art. It looks like. So with all those thinking and the influence, then I started doing some of the Buddhas. And then also I mentioned the talk in last night, also during that time I have a kind of a choice, which is actually even my friends giving me advice, because Peter Taus, he's my friend. I think he introduced me to the Central St. Martin, and so he said, now you are in London, so you got 3 choices. Either you just do what you do in Dharamsala, or you just leave that behind and go wild with this Western whatever you want, or go between. Then I choose the between, the middle way, and so that was kind of interesting journey, and it took me a while to figure out how to keep that Buddha going. So this is also one of those pieces, and also yes, another thing I have to mention here quickly, and there is one of the party I went, I saw someone put the Buddha in the floor of the bathroom. That was kind of big revolution for me, because I kind of get shocked by the Buddha sitting in somebody's bathroom and even in the floor. And so it really made me thinking, and also I have to say this has really opened my mind and my eye. Then after that experience, then I keep seeing the Buddha in somebody's garden, somebody's bedroom, even a commercial shop. Then later I also see them in advertisement, and even associated with fashion and very trendy stuff. So that's really opened my mind. Say maybe the Buddha can be flexible, doesn't need to be a religious figure. And so that's why I started practicing using Buddha figure to explore different way of making the representation. But the aim was try to make it accessible to the audience. And also, I mean, one of the challenge go to London was as an artist, you also really want to accept it by the new environment, and also accepted by the mainstream art scene in London. So somehow I have to try to, that was kind of desire. So because that driven, then I try to explore more of way of making the representation of Buddha. So that's also one of the pieces I try to make a Western kind of very business Western style shirts for the Buddhas. So there is a six arms on that particular shirt. Then also kind of multiple colors. Do you say colors? Yeah, colors. Thank you. And of course, then also associated with the British Union Jack. So that was also one of the attempts to explore this idea. And then also able me to really focus and also get away from the traditional thinking. And then I deliberately put myself into the London scene, which means, I try to get away from the Tibetan community. So during that time, I made many friends from different nationalities, artists, and so that was kind of interesting experiment. Oh, can I get some water? Then also, when all those things happening, there is still one of the painful subject which is always in my head, which is about my own identity. And because that was one of the reasons also I went to India, because I was really I was searching for this pure Tibetan identity, which is because I was born in the 60s, and when I born, I mean, the Tibet is not the Tibet used to be. And then especially after 4 years in Beijing, somehow through the reading, through seeing different things, and then somehow there is kind of urge in my heart. I really want to know more about my own culture, and also, I mean, some point I even become a very kind of mentor. I mean, even I want to become I want to just dress up like a real Tibetan, which is I call that time, which was this picture really touched me when I saw this first picture in Dharamsala, I thought this is the real Tibetan artist. That's what I should be, with long hair, earring, then the costume, then sit cross-legged. But the problem is, I even couldn't sit cross-legged for half an hour. So that's the first time I saw this picture in Dharamsala. It's really touched me. There is something I couldn't quite tell, something. Then in London, after quite a few years in 2003, suddenly I kind of figure out what I should do with this issue of identity. Then I have to say, when I complete that whole piece, I was feel relieved, and then somehow I feel I made a peace with myself, and also after finishing that piece, I feel I'm different person. I'm not anymore of extreme. I'm not so nationalistic. That's it. And then I feel I'm become much more tolerant and also more understanding person. Especially, I think during the time in London, I met a lot of refugee artists from different parts of the world. When I talk to them, suddenly I feel that the Tibetan issue is not the only issue in the world. There is so many suffering in different parts of the world. So this is just one part of the big issue. And so I finished the piece, which is in 2003, and somehow I did feel quite relieved. Then that time I only did the 4-piece. Then last year, or is that the year before, of course, after I finished that 4-piece in 2003, people keep asking me, is there a 5th identity? And also I was contemplating that idea, but I somehow never really figure out how I'm going to do it. But just 2013 or 14, suddenly I feel I'm ready for the 5th one. So that's the 5th one. Then also I did that actually in Lhasa, unlike the other one I did in London. Or the surrounding we just created by using sometimes Photoshop or sometimes, but this time it's real. And so that's the 5th one, which is then I just want to point to something. The similarity with the first one is both the artists wearing the traditional unit costume and also very traditional surrounding. But the difference is the last one, the surrounding is much more dynamic, and also you can show the artist's interest is much more wider and much more complex compared to the first one. And so that's something I really experienced during the past couple of years visiting Lhasa in Tibet. So I just want to put that into this. And then we're going to come back to the topic, which is ink to the stickers. And so this is the first sticker piece I did in 2004. And as I mentioned before, there is kind of desire want to be accepted by the mainstream art scene in London. Then also there is a challenge for, actually probably for any non-Western artist, how you make your work can be understood by this new surrounding on the new audience. And especially most challenging for me is somehow I don't want to let the Buddha figure or the form go away. I still want to hold on to it. But then try to make this Buddha figure more accessible for someone doesn't have any knowledge of Tibet or Buddhism. It was quite a big challenge. And but somehow I think through the sticker, I kind of managed to make that breakthrough. And the other reason I mentioned yesterday, my English, especially my reading, is really poor. And so during that time in London, I mean, even now, I think my art, if I need to kind of get something from my surrounding or learn something, it's through my eye, much less than reading, because that was in the 80s when I was in China. My Chinese are perfect, so I can read lots of books. But somehow, from India to England, I hardly finish any books. I mean, somehow my wife used to joke for me, say, if you can't go to sleep, just grab one English book, which has really happened, yes. So that really made my kind of collecting information mainly through observation. And then I think stickers kind of perfectly fit into this. And then during the time in London, in that time, I mean, the street art is become so popular and a very interesting art form in London. And then I also really kind of amazed about those the advertisement billboard in the city and those fashion magazines. So basically, yes, I collecting all my information through observation. And so that sticker seems fitting to that process perfectly. So that's a kind of few of the samples I think I did that time. Oh yeah, that's what I was talking about. So I remember my first time in New York was 99 or 98. When I first went to the Times Square, I was kind of shocked. And then since then, actually, Times Square has become my favorite place. I stayed in New York for past 5, almost 6 years. I used to go there so often, and sometimes, you know, if I really want to chill out, I just go to Times Square. So that's also kind of thing. I mean, basically, I've become quite a big fan of downtown. Somehow, I mean, I do go to museum, but rare, I think, except if there is something I really want to see. But I mainly like downtown. Yeah, the parade. I think America has the best parade in the world, I have to say. And then, of course, being play with the sticker and play with the Buddha, then gradually I also want to say something through the sticker and say something through the Buddha form. And then I started doing some of those work. And so this is Chinese writing combined with the Tibetan. And then I quote those Chinese from Chairman Mao's Red Book, which is I'm so familiar with. And then there is a chapter he's talking about the minority issue. So I just quote some of his from his article. And then I think the Tibetan probably it's I don't quite remember. Maybe it's from the Tibetan manuscript about Buddhism. Then also I did a series of called Tibetan Idol, because that time also in England there's a very popular TV program called Idol, Pop Idol, and then I did a series of Tibetan Idol, which is try to show the dynamic of the Tibetan society, because it's not only anymore of the one kind of Tibetan. There is, for instance, this is talking about communist Tibetan. Then there's also it's Chinese, and there's Chinese quote. I find a magazine talking about one Chinese, not Tibetan lady in Lhasa. She's being so loving with the motherland and also the party. Then she's been doing putting the national flag in her house, just like what happened in Beijing Tiananmen Square for past 30 years non-stop. So I find this kind of amazing. So that was the quote from that. And then this is also another piece. I think this one is even the Buddha is not the main figure. Actually, it's hiding behind as a background. The front figure is the image from Iraq. I think it's called Abu Ghraib. Is that right? So it's talking about how the American military was really bad, treat the Iraqis so badly. So that was one of the pieces. And then this is also another piece. I think that around 2008 and 9, because everybody remember in 2008, just before the Chinese Olympic game, there is a huge protest happening. Started from outside, then probably inside Lhasa in Tibet. And then the sad thing is during that protest also, Tibetan get killed and also Chinese get killed, especially in Lhasa. Then there is a big debate about, because the Dalai Lama was saying, we are going to go to middle way and the peace way. Then there is a Tibetan killing Chinese. Then suddenly the Tibetans become what do you call it, a villain? Or
a villain?
That's it. And so this piece is talk about this Buddha become a villain. And then unfortunately you can't see the detail. There's tons of Chinese writing on the background, which is I quote from the Chinese magazine, which is Chinese was very angry at the Tibetan, and also there is a Tibetan try to kind of learn from that experience. This is one of the pieces, actually, one of the few first pieces I did when I moved to New York. And then the title, actually, I think I quote from Obama's speech, probably, I think. I'm sure everyone remember. Then, unfortunately, we can't see the detail. Basically, this piece is talking about how Americans are really frustrated by the downtown going down with the economic, and also the frustration of the politics, and also frustrated about the middle class and the race, and then there is also frustration about the Wall Street, and so there is lots of quote and lots of image around. Even the main figure is Buddha, but when you look, the surrounding actually is nothing to do with the Buddha. And then that's also another piece, which is talking about the Europe, which is there's a Euro crisis in the past couple of years. So basically, what I was trying to do is through this Buddha form and the sticker to express my kind of common or my kind of thinking of what's happening in the world. And this is also a piece, I think it's about the environment. So here, I think the mandala representing the Shangri-La, because I mean, everyone know now there is a lot of destruction in China, also in Tibet. So there is huge crisis with the environment. So what I was trying to say that the mandala is kind of melting down. And I think this is one of the detail. Oh yes, then for me, I think what the Buddha containing is so important for me, because every sticker or every piece of cutout, when I put it into it, it's I do lots of preparations. Also, I kind of try to make a kind of meaning of it. So then the other thing, I think also it's kind of influence from my own kind of Tibetan religious art tradition, because as you know, the Tibetan tanka is so detail oriented. I mean, normally they don't leave much empty space. And then somehow I really like that. Then actually, not just tanka, even, I mean, basically I noticed lots of the religious art, it's so rich with the details. And so that's something I find fascinating. And then I that's what I was trying to do through my work. Then I think it's the same with the philosophy I learned in 4 years study in Beijing with the Chinese painting, because I mean, one of the things with the Chinese painting, especially there is one style of painting called gongbi, which is very detail orientated. So when you go to the museum, I mean, that's one of the difference between the Western, say, classical painting and the Eastern classical painting. Because Western classical painting, you have to kind of back up to look. But it's somehow, when you go to see some of the tanka or the Chinese or even Japanese, you have to kind of go closer. So this is something I find very interesting. So then I try to have maybe kind of both. Say, when you look far, you see this kind of big shape of the Buddha. But when you get closer, then there's plenty for you to look at. So I like that kind of relationship. And so I'm kind of very, what's the word? I think, is that called meticulous or? Meticulous? Yeah, meticulous about this detail. And sometimes it does drive me a little mad, but I still enjoy doing it. Then I think other subject I also really interested is play with word, and this is I think also it's part of the influence through my 4-year study with the Chinese brush painting, because traditional Chinese painting, I think, as a complete piece, you have to have an image, you also have to have a writing, and also you have to have the stamp. So that's kind of 3 things. Then if you have 3 of those things arranged properly, then the piece is kind of finished. Then somehow I really like that. So probably you can see all my work. I'm really careful where I put the stamp, and also I'm very like much of using word to go with the image. And this is one of the series I did 2008 called God series. So I picked quite a few different languages using sticker to create a kind of God word. And then this is kind of still ongoing project, which is, I think I started probably around 2005 or 4. This is something language, no, I can't say language, it's a word, which is I created. Basically one word is a combination of Chinese and Tibetan putting together. And of course, for me, it's quite a kind of very meaningful, but nobody can read it, and also probably, but it's kind of something I always think it's into me, because I feel sometimes, I'm kind of half Chinese and half Tibetan. So that's a kind of become my also part of the identity. And then I went through kind of create kind of language or words to express that. This is also part of the word much later. I think it was 2014. I create a series work which is I think it's called something called play with this phrase, and especially I think in China it's become a very popular. Actually, not even in China. I think even in America, because then I was kind of also amazed about even the politician and the people in power. Using the language and then to describe something much, I mean, like using animals' name or using all kinds of things to express their view, which is very clever. I think it's also so accessible for the people. I mean, most famous one in early 80s, I think Deng Xiaoping was saying, you know, the black cat and the white cat. I mean, basically he was saying, you know, I don't care if you're a black cat or white cat, but if you do a good job, you are still a good cat. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the message, you know, so easy for people to understand. And then it's happened again in 2014, around this time, with the new leader. And because China, there's so many corruptions, then suddenly there's using animal name to tell which one is the big one, which one is the little one. So this is tiger. which is the big character. And then the small one, I think they're called Changying. Maybe it's called fly, I guess. And so I find it kind of fascinating. Then I created quite a few pieces, then also with some English. This one, actually, somebody told me is the nickname for this huge how do you call it, civilian? Yeah, what's the guy's name? He went to Russia. He explored.
Snowden.
That's it.
Snowden.
He basically was saying there is these things happening. Then that's the name actually being put for this whole system. So they don't call civilian, but this is the words that describe this whole very scaring system. Then I thought it's fascinating. And then this time I used not just sticker. I used lots of jam, very tacky stuff, which is kind of I saw past couple of years it was so popular with the iPhone case, which is also started from China. Yeah, so that's something I find it very interesting. Then, now I live in Chengdu, so it's so easy to get access to the social media, what's happening in China. So I'm still collecting a lot of those phrases or words, which is quite amazing, I think, in China. Some people are amazingly talented. They can describe something very serious, but using kind of very, how do you call it, playful words. Then that's also quite a recent practice of mine, which is I'm using a sticker. I'm not a religious, and also I don't think I'm a Buddhist yet, because I don't really practice, even though I'm interested about the philosophy. But somehow one of the things it's kind of fascinating me is not just I think Tibetan Buddhist. I think it seems every religion, the way the how do you call it, the make a part of the practice or part of the ritual, which is they have to do something repeated, kind of this repetition. Then I don't know much about this, but one thing I kind of knew is the way to practice your mind, especially for the Tibetans. In Tibetan community, if you are Buddhist, you always have this beads in yourself, and also as a practice you have to do ritual in the morning and the evening. Then has to be. Then sometimes I think it's the same thing you do. Then I think last 2 years I moved out of the city. I went to stay in upstate New York, and I had a little baby, and then it makes me thinking of my life, kind of doing something kind of every day, repeating, and so I'm not quite sure. I haven't quite come up this what I'm doing with this work, but I want to kind of explore this this motion of repetition, and also I want to see what it can do for me. Because, for instance, this piece, actually that figure is how many sticker I put on that piece. And I think I have a detail. So it's all little sticker of Tibetan character. So it took me quite a few weeks, actually about months, to complete. And so I just want to make something. I don't quite know what it's going to lead me to, but this is something I'm doing now with some. I mean, I'm still doing the Buddha work, but this is also one of the part of the exercise or practice I was doing. Then I have to see. I mean, it's amazing experience because before, when I was putting sticker, of course there's 1,000 of in the one of those Buddhas, but they're all different. But this time, it's just one thing, same image, same surface, and then I was putting them one by one. So I want to gain some experience. So that's also the 18,000 sticker on that one. I think that's the detail. Then also, I choose a circle. Actually, I also did kind of a couple of square one. Then it says probably reference to the Tibetan mandala. Oh yeah. At last, I think that's some of the sticker I did myself and designed. Then went to China, Yiwu, where they produce all the goods, which is go all over the world, to made those stickers. And because past couple of years, when I was dealing with the sticker, one thing I realized, sticker has become quite a big cultural phenomenon, not just in the West, now also in Asia. And then the amazing thing about the sticker is it's kind of very urban and also quite easy access for, I mean, who doesn't like stickers? And then also one thing I noticed, there's more politician, government bodies, and of course the business or the commercial. They're always doing that, but now there's even more politicians and even government or parties producing their own stickers, because they probably knew this is something people can easily get access. And then I try to make few stickers, because in Tibetan I noticed there's quite a limited, because the only one we have is quite a more like political slogan, but I want to put something more, more representing Tibetan daily life, or something more culture. And then also nice thing about the sticker is it's a playful, it's fun to have a sticker in house. Then I think that's also kind of the aim of my work, which is I want to make something, as you mentioned, beautiful, but also kind of playful, but also have a meaningful. And then I think stickers kind of giving me all those ideas. I think probably that's the last one. So thank you so much. I think I hope I didn't take too much of your time. And thank you.
Any questions? Do you experience, when you were in art school in China as a Tibetan, did you experience any anti-Tibetan sentiment?
Mm-hmm. No, actually, I have to say. Of course, there is a fight, because especially in my school, it's called National Minority School, which is, we have probably about 50 different minorities. When those boys get drunk, they do fight each other. Even sometimes you do fight with the local Chinese. I mean, a lot of my Tibetan friends being beaten up. But I think it's more kind of like a young man when they go out to drink and get in trouble. But for me, no, I didn't really experience any when I was there. I mean, the only reason I kind of realized, but one thing I have to say, it was kind of funny. Before I go to Beijing study, I even didn't know I'm Tibetan. Yes, it's kind of very vague those days, the Tibetan or Chinese. But after 4 years in Beijing, then I knew I'm Tibetan. So that's kind of the interesting thing happened. Then I think I heard it's still happening with those Tibetan when they go to study in China. For instance, some of my niece, I mean, before they go to Beijing or go to China, I mean, they don't talk about anything about Tibet or being Tibetan. But after 2-3 years, when they came back, suddenly they're starting talking about Tibet and start kind of more into the Tibetan custom, which is kind of interesting. Yeah.
What about now in Chengdu? Do you experience any difference?
No, I didn't see it. But somehow, I mean, it might took some time. I mean, I have to tell you the truth. I just been to Chengdu since last November, so I spent quite a few months there already. What I learned and also what I saw there was, it's kind of reverse. I remember in the 80s when I was in Tibet, those days, Chinese are very scared to go to Tibet because they're scared with the environment, because it's high and cold. Also, they think it's dirty. And I mean, the government has to really persuade some Chinese, please go there. Then they will raise their salary, and so it was very difficult for them to send someone to Tibet. But now, I mean, just recently, I was talking to one of my assistant. He's a young boy, just finishing his master in art school. Then he told me last year he went to Lhasa cycling. Then I thought, wow, from Chengdu to Lhasa. I mean, I thought it's going to be probably kind of amazing challenge because it's a very difficult road. But he said he went there even with very light luggage, because he's telling me from Chengdu to Lhasa, every day he came across around 1,000 bikers heading to Lhasa. Then throughout the road there is plenty guest house, because the farmers, the nomads, opened their house as a guest house for the Chinese. And he was saying there's a bikers, there's a trucker, there's a car, there's a motorcycle. They're all heading to Lhasa. And I was kind of shocked. It's not the case many years ago. So I think somehow it's changing. Tibet has become a very popular destination, especially for the young Chinese. And then, of course, I'm sure you must read from the newspaper. I mean, Tibetan monks also become very popular in China. I mean, the Chengdu, the place where I live, I mean, I saw lots of monks with their Chinese sponsor or or the followers, because now there is I believe quite a large Chinese following Tibetan Buddhism. So yeah, it's quite an eye-open for me. And then also I was telling my friends in Chengdu, even there is quite a size of Tibetan town in the middle of the Chengdu, which is I've never seen anywhere in the world. So I was kind of amazed about the tolerant attitude of the city government to the Tibetans.
Is that Sweet Tea House in China?
No, I think the Sweet Tea House is become a little kind of history now. We don't have an actual space, even though I still have the name. But hopefully one day I want to start again. Yeah.
As an international artist, are there any restrictions placed on your travel from China and or Tibet? Do you have to get permission in a way to travel abroad?
Yes, apparently I do, because I'm no longer a Chinese citizen, so I'm British. And yeah, it is a little challenge to especially go to Lhasa, because I do need to get a permit. Yeah. But I think mainland China is quite easy. Yeah, you can travel anywhere you like, but except Lhasa. Yeah.
I just wanted to comment. I just think it's really wonderful that you shared this with us, because I think about your first slide, and your first slides, and you use the word loneliness and the landscape, and now you're to joy, and I think that personal journey for identity is moving in a such a positive direction for you, and I think it's shows the sort of the pain and the joy of taking that journey. So I really thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.